Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Dawn Neeson.
And touchdown in Belfast. Joe Biden has arrived in Northern Ireland, continuing excitement, and pledged to secure the future of the Good Friday Agreement and the Windsor Framework, which will please Rishi Sunak, mentioning both at the same time.
Indeed. Get back to work. Downing Street says there's going to be no pay talks with junior doctors unless they drop their demands for a 35% pay rise. But as a leader of the junior doctors is on holiday in Greece, they can't really negotiate, can they?
A bit tricky. I mean, they're complaining that the government aren't talking to them, but they're not there to talk to the government.
Indeed.
It's a cunning plan. Meanwhile, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is meeting world leaders in a bid to avoid a new global financial crisis. Good luck with that. This all comes as the IMF predicts that the UK will be the poorest performing big economy this year. What does it mean for the pound in your pocket? Stay with us and find out.
And Harry and Meghan, are they going to cause coronation chaos? Reports that there's a string of last-minute problems for Charles and Camilla's big day because those two still won't say whether they're going or not.
I do. Thoughts on all of our talking points today, email us at gbnews@gbnews.uk. But first, we're coming to the news with your lovely Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Dawn. Good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The US President will hold talks with the Prime Minister on the first full day of his visit to Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Joe Biden was greeted by Rishi Sunak as he landed in Belfast last night. He'll also meet the main political leaders in Stormont ahead of his speech at Ulster University later. The four-day trip coincides with the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. It also comes as devolved power sharing in the region remains collapsed over post-Brexit trade concerns. Biden said supporting the Windsor framework is one of his top priorities. Thousands of junior doctors are striking for a second day. Members of the British Medical Association are staging 4 days of industrial action this week, saying they have no other choice. But Health Secretary Steve Barclay is accusing the BMA of putting patients at greater risk after not agreeing any national exemptions for some services such as cancer care. Downing Street is refusing to hold further talks with the union unless they abandon the 35% pay rise demand. Labour is pledging to get our high streets thriving again by cutting business rates and energy bills. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves are in Great Yarmouth today to launch its new 5-point plan. Under new measures, the party will support energy efficiency measures, as well as pay for 13,000 more neighbourhood police. And the Ministry of Defence says there are a serious level of inaccuracy in alleged leaked documents which claim UK Special Forces have operated in Ukraine. Reports say as many as 50 personnel have been deployed alongside other Western forces, although the locations and missions have not been revealed. The classified US documents may have been released on the chat room of the social media platform Discord. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now it's back to Andrew and Dawn.
Well, Joe Biden's here, albeit a flying visit, 15 hours or 16 hours in Northern Ireland. 7 or 8 of those asleep in bed, 7 or 8 of those asleep on the job.
He needs his afternoon nap, doesn't he, a man of that age?
He's meeting the leaders of Northern Ireland's main party today, but we don't know for how long.
And he's got his sister with him and meeting some cousins as well. Which bit is the most important, I wonder? Yeah. But, you know, there are lots of talks going on. I just hope something... I'm wearing green today in honour of Ireland and what's going on and hoping that it has a very happy ending for everybody.
Indeed. He's going to make a big speech at Ulster University this morning, but the Prime Minister will already be back, on his way back, before he then heads to the Republic of Ireland, where he's going to spend 2.5 days.
It's not very long, is it, really? But joining us now for more on this is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Good morning, Doogie. It looks lovely and sunny there. Is the mood lovely and sunny, though?
Well, it is. It is always great to welcome any American president here. In the last few years, we've had quite a few of them. We've had George Bush, we've had Barack Obama, and of course Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton will probably be the one that will steal the show here today. He's speaking in Queen's University, and he spends quite a bit of time here in Northern Ireland. As for Joe Biden, well, as Andrew's pointed out, he arrived here 10 o'clock last night. He made it into Bedford Street in Belfast at his hotel. There was only about 100 people there to greet him. If that was Bill Clinton, there was quite literally thousands to greet him. He will spend time this morning with the 5 political parties to try and see can he break the deadlock in around Stormount's constant problems that they have, and that is over the framework document. So going into that saying that he's supporting the framework document isn't really going to do much for unionists who aren't going back into power. But to have Stormont down during an anniversary isn't an uncommon thing. Sinn Féin weren't in power in the 20th anniversary. They stayed out for 3 years. And now what we have is the 25th anniversary, the unionists not in power. It has a very clunky agreement from round about the first 5 years after it was made. The moderates lost control, and right and left went other ways. But at this Ulster University behind us, he should be due here about 12 o'clock. He will be leaving here at about 1:30.
All right, Doogie, that's Doogie Beattie, our Northern Ireland reporter. Bill Clinton is going to completely steal the show today, isn't he?
I think he is. I mean, it's interesting when you look back at the previous visits of the presidents, and you look back at, I know it's going back a long way, but JFK when he was there.
Yeah.
Absolutely mobbed.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden, it's like...
I know. And he is the most Irish president since JFK.
I know.
But he is using it just as a romp through the Irish countryside to meet his second cousins, and it will play very well with the Irish-American voters back home.
Aren't they fifth cousins or something or other? I don't talk to my first cousin. Well, I do that. I love them. They're lovely, but we don't talk.
No, they don't talk to you.
Oh, that's it, yeah. Thank God you're talking to me this morning. Well, Biden's visit follows 4 suspected pipe bombs being found in the city cemetery in Londonderry.
More violent acts also witnessed on Monday when petrol bombs were thrown at police during a Republican protest. Joining us now is the Press Association's Ireland editor, David Young. David, morning. Always worrying when we see incidents like this, but compared to where we were 25 years ago, it's nothing like the same scale of dissident activity.
No, indeed. I think it is important to put all this in context in regard to what we're facing in Northern Ireland. Yes, it's a dangerous situation, and the dissidents do pose a threat. That threat primarily is towards the security forces. So I don't think people going about their everyday business have any fears in terms of what it was like pre-1998, obviously during the Troubles. So it's night and day compared to them. The numbers of the dissidents are very small in comparison. They have very little community support in the areas within which they operate. But that doesn't, I suppose, make them any less dangerous in terms of their capacity to launch sporadic and one-off attacks. And we saw that in February when an off-duty detective was very, very fortunate to escape with his life when he was shot multiple times at a leisure centre in Omagh in County Tyrone. So Monday's events and the discovery yesterday, I suppose, is just another reminder of the threat they pose, albeit not a big one, but still one that the security services and the forces over here take very, very seriously.
David, just a quick question. We've already been discussing that Biden is over there seeing family, as well as obviously the important visit of the political side of things. Can I just ask, do you think his Irishness is a plus or a minus for this visit?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I suppose throughout his period in office, he's been somewhat of a polarising figure over here in terms of unionists in particular would tend to characterise him as being too willing and too ready to maybe accept the EU's position on the Brexit debate, to accept the Irish government's position on the Brexit debate. And I mean, Joe Biden doesn't make any secret of the fact that he is very, very proud of his Irish heritage. And so whereas maybe the nationalist parties in Northern Ireland would be very, very keen on Joe Biden and would obviously embrace him and welcome him warmly over here, I don't think it goes as far as unionists aren't welcoming here, but I just think they view him in the context of the fact that they know he's very much aligned to his Irish roots and his Irish heritage. And if it was to come to the push between a political argument and a political standoff, which essentially it was between the UK and the Irish government over the fallout from the Brexit process, I think unionists would always be of the view that he may be more inclined to take the Irish point of view in those sort of negotiations.
All right, that's David Young, who's the Press Association's Ireland editor. Thanks for joining us, David. Politically, of course, just before he got on the plane, Biden indicated he's running again to be president, even though he's 80 going on 94. He's not a young octogenarian. He's not a young 80-year-old, Dawn. He's not a young 80.
He does need a few naps, it has to be said, and he can. But
and
I actually feel sorry for him.
A few prompts, tell him where he is.
Yeah, and it's an awful lot of pressure on someone of that age to travel all this way, and it's quite a packed itinerary. I do feel sorry for him, but I do, as we were saying the other day, it's like we're expecting people in their 80s to take driving tests now.
Yeah.
We don't trust them to take driving tests, and they're trusting him to run the country.
I know. So.
Right, well, for more on this, we are actually going to speak to the chair of the Republican Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Good morning.
Good morning, Dawn.
Good morning, Greg. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're brilliant, aren't we?
We're good. We're
very
good for.
Interesting time. Yes. So, what do you make of Biden's visit? How is it being received in America? What are they pleased that he's here, or do they not really care?
Yeah, for the most part, they probably don't really care. I mean, I think President Biden really, has two reasons for doing this. One is political, one is personal. He still seems to think that the Irish-American voting bloc is really critical to political fortunes, and I'm not sure that's the case. It might have been a generation or two ago. You know, we've got 30 or 40 million Irish Americans. I'm one of them. My ancestors came over around the same time as Biden's Irish ancestors. You know, it's a big deal, but it's not that big of a deal. So I think he's probably making a mistake. For the most part, the United States is very pro-UK, very pro-British. We understand the history that our great documents are in many cases derived from, you know, the great British documents, the Bill of Rights in 1689, the Magna Carta. There's a real sense of special relationship that President Biden just doesn't get. And I think that's a mistake. So he's got these personal grievances. He's still stuck in this, you know, Irish grievance culture, which has disappeared for the most part. Even the Kennedys, and you saw Joe Kennedy in that in the clip earlier, greeting President Biden. Because he's now the special envoy to Northern Ireland. You know, the Kennedys got over that whole grievance thing. So I'm not sure that he's making I think he's making a political mistake here, letting his personal bias and personal grievances step ahead of the great special relationship between the US and the UK.
Is he making a great political mistake too for the Democrats, Greg, in saying that he is going to run again? He's already 80, he'll be 82 come the next election, and he'd be 86 by the end of his four-year term.
Yes, and as you pointed out, Andrew, you know, he's not a young 80. I mean, this is a man with obvious cognitive challenges, and he's, you know, the constant gaffes and tripping on the stairs of Air Force One. I mean, the list is long. These are embarrassments. But the problem is that Democrats don't have a clear heir apparent. 4 years ago when he was running, you know, the heir apparent was Kamala Harris, but she's polling even worse than Biden. So the administration's been a disaster by most metrics, by most measures. And so if the fact that Kamala Harris is polling even worse than Biden means there's really no obvious heir. And that's why no one else has stepped up. I know that Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is kicking it around. But I think that, you know, until there's a clear, you know, younger generation that can take over, I don't see why he's in any rush to announce formally. I know he teased, you know, the media over the weekend, but there's just, you know, this is a party with no young leadership on the bench.
And it's interesting, too, because we're going to see Bill Clinton this morning, Greg, and whatever you think of him, he was a class act, real charisma, and he's going to completely upstage the president.
Absolutely, just like Barack Obama did in the White House a few months ago. You know, this is clearly, you know, a failed administration, but without the charm of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Both of those men were gifted politicians and also gifted orators, neither of which is President Biden. So, you know, it's probably going to be an unpleasant look for Biden. You know, you're right, Bill Clinton was a rock star on his visits to Ireland and Northern Ireland, as was Barack Obama, John Kennedy. You know, so there's some history there, and I'm not sure that President Biden can fit. And again, as you pointed out, Andrew, he's only spending 15 hours in Northern Ireland. It's a clear snub to the United Kingdom, you know, on top of the fact that he's not attending the coronation, and then spending 2.5 days in Ireland. It's really not a good look for the U.S. special relationship with the UK.
Thank you, Greg, for joining us this morning. That's Greg
Good to be here.
Swenson, Chair of
Thanks,
Republicans Overseas. Thank you.
Now, the doctor's strike, second day of the doctor's strike, and, of course, we're fascinated by the fact one of the leaders of the doctor's strike, he's gone on holiday. He's gone to Greece for a week.
It's a bit like us just going, right, let's go on holiday, shall we now?
Exactly.
We've got nothing important to do this morning.
And they keep saying, where's Steve Barclay, the Secretary of State for Health? Why would we negotiate? How can he negotiate? He's on holiday in Greece for a week, getting paid.
Well, hospital chiefs are concerned that their continued absence would put patient safety at risk. So, quite rightly, obviously. Let's speak to our political reporter, Catherine Forster. Good morning, Catherine.
Yes, hello.
Catherine, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Yes, loud and clear.
Welcome. Sorry, it's very noisy. Welcome to St Thomas's Hospital. As you can see, just across the river from Westminster, where the junior doctors are on day 2 of this longest ever doctors' strike. 4 days, along with the Easter holiday and the weekend coming up. That means 10 days of continual disruption. Now, I was just talking to a junior doctor before we came on air. She was saying that She routinely works 60 to 70 hours per week, and because there is such a shortage of doctors, such a recruitment crisis within the NHS, she's often doing the job of 2 or 3 doctors. She's completely exhausted. She's saying that many of her friends have gone abroad to better paid jobs. She's saying it's not just about the money, but the money is part of it, but it's also the conditions. Now, meanwhile, as you referred to, the BMA co-chairman away on holiday, not the best look, but both sides really are digging in. The junior doctors are not budging currently on their 35% pay demand, and the government, I was at the lobby briefing in Downing Street yesterday, the government are saying very firmly, we're not going to talk to you until you drop this demand. I'm hearing today something about half that they might start to talk, and also that for the government to come to the table, they want the junior doctors to call off the strikes. No sign of that happening, both sides digging in, and all we can really say is that the people that are suffering because of this, of course, are the public, all the people having operations cancelled. An estimate that some 1/3 procedures and appointments will be cancelled this week.
That's a reporter at St Thomas Hospital. Thanks for joining us. Now, the Labour leader is out and about. He says British businesses, he's talking about the High Street, have been held back by 13 years of Tory economic failure. He would say that, wouldn't he, Dawn?
He would say that, absolutely. But he has a cunning plan.
Ah.
A very cunning plan.
Right.
So cunning, he's going to talk about it later today. The Labour Party are announcing a 5-point plan even. He's got a couple of points here on this one. To revitalise local high streets, including 700 million to support small businesses with their energy bills. Now, to tell us more about this, Tom, because it's very exciting, to tell us more about this is Tom Harwood.
Yeah.
Golly gosh. Tom, this cunning 5-point plan, what do we think he's going to say?
Well, the fascinating thing about this, of course, is that we really are into the midst of the local election campaign. We've been seeing this with more and more vicious attack ads from the Labour Party in recent days, and indeed in visits to various parts of the country. It's interesting that Sir Keir Starmer is going to Great Yarmouth, of course. This is the seat of the former chair of the Conservative Party, the seat of the former Northern Ireland Secretary, the former Justice Secretary as well, Brandon Lewis. The Labour Party really thinks it can make inroads in a lot of places that are traditionally seen to be more conservative. And one of the ways they're doing that is through the sort of bread and butter issues that people might discuss over breakfast. High streets have been declining, not just in this country, but across the Western world as more businesses shifted online. And the Labour Party has said a little bit about what they want to do with regard to high streets. In fact, 2 party conferences ago, the Labour Party, back when Sir Keir Starmer looked a lot less stable in his position than he does now, was talking about reforming the business rates system. So scrapping the system of business rates as it stands, but replacing it with something else. We don't quite know the detail of what they want to replace it with. Perhaps we'll hear a little bit more about that later today.
Or how they're going to pay for it. The big story that's got both Dawn and I going, Tom, is in the Mail today, my paper. Outrageous. A French warship effectively making a cross-channel ferry change direction so it can escort 2 migrant boats to Dover. How much are we paying the flipping French over the next 3 years? £480 million. This is outrageous, isn't it?
It is extraordinary, but it is, of course, a function of how the Channel is currently governed and how relations between France and the United Kingdom work. As soon as a boat gets in the water from the French shoreline, the French won't touch it.
No.
They will not touch it. They will not even, if it's a metre into the water, they won't bring it back. In fact, sometimes they will escort it to the halfway point across the Channel, at which point it becomes the British problem. And this is an intractable issue because the United Kingdom and France have had many different discussions. The United Kingdom has sent hundreds of millions of pounds to France. There have been, it must be said, some successes. A new detention centre being constructed now on the French side of the border. The French are putting money into that as well. More patrols, joint patrols now on the beaches. But the fundamental issue of whether or not the French will take people back, whether or not the French will actually grab the boats as soon as they're in the water. They're happy to grab the boats on land, but they won't grab the boats in the water. That has not been sorted out, and the French are not willing to talk about any sorts of returns agreement bilaterally with the United Kingdom, that would be something that requires a multilateral agreement. But we do have some hints that in what's called the Calais Group of these northern European countries, it meets, I think, twice a year now. Perhaps in the next meetings of that group, a more multilateral returns agreement might be something that's on the cards.
That's 480 million is a lot of money
Over 3
for
years.
one centre and a few more patrols on the beach.
And we've been spending millions prior to that too. There's nothing. The Prime Minister will be frustrated because if he doesn't get this stop the boats policy sorted, Tom, I think he's toast. And deservedly so, because it's becoming one of the #1 political issues.
Absolutely, and I think this is one of the reasons why we've heard in recent days that the Prime Minister is not considering a May election in 2024, but is instead considering an October election in 2024. We know that traditionally boat trips tend to increase over the summer and then decrease as the weather gets worse. That hasn't quite so much been the case in the last 12 months. But I think the hope of the Prime Minister will be that if those number of boats arrivals is coming down by the time of the next election rather than going up, that'll have him in a stronger stead. However, the slogan is stop the boats.
Yeah.
Stop the boats.
Yeah.
Not reduce the boats, but stop the boats.
And are we any closer to knowing when the flipping planes are going to go up to Rwanda, fly to Rwanda?
I mean, I could give you some sort of big spiel about what are the expectations and what people behind the scenes might be thinking, but nobody knows. Nobody knows.
They've got to get it sorted, Tom.
They do. And frankly, this is why the Prime Minister put it as one of his top 5 priorities. He knows how salient this issue is, particularly amongst red wall constituencies. This is a matter of fairness, this is a matter of border security, this is a matter of, frankly, integrity for the government.
Yeah, and Labour will do nothing about it, so they've got to get it sorted.
They're sorting the high streets out, they've got other problems, remember. Right, up next, we'll have more from the upcoming meeting between Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. We have a very windy day ahead of us, particularly if you are in western southern areas of the UK, all due to the squeeze around this area of low pressure that's going to be dominating our weather throughout Wednesday, particularly southern coastal areas of England up into southwest Wales and then Northern Ireland as well. We have the potential for 40, 50 mile an hour gusts inland, but 60 mile an hour plus along some coastal areas. That is enough to cause some travel disruption, particularly to ferries, and we could see some large waves around those coasts as well. We'll be accompanied by some quite heavy rain, at times perhaps wintry over the higher grounds of Eryri and the Pennines. Slightly drier further to the east and the north, but certainly still the risk of some showers throughout the day. Temperatures quite disappointing, around 7 to 10 degrees Celsius. Add on the strength of that wind, is going to feel more like 2 or 4 degrees if you step outside. Into this evening, continuing to see those showery outbreaks of rain. Might ease off a bit more into Wales, southwestern areas of England as we move into the second half of the night, but still quite breezy here. The rain persisting across the north, particularly Argyll and Bute, down into the Scottish borders and northern areas of England. Underneath some of those clearer intervals, we could see temperatures drop down towards 2-4 degrees Celsius, but with the breeze around, that will reduce the risk of frost for all of us. Some brightness early on Thursday for Wales, central southern areas of England, and the winds will also be easing down here a bit more as well. Still will feel slightly cold, but hopefully slightly better compared to Wednesday at least. The showers persisting in the north, and it will remain quite blustery across Northern Ireland, southern areas of Scotland and northern England. Temperatures again hovering around 10, maybe now 12, 13 degrees Celsius in the south. Remaining quite unsettled as we head into Friday as well, perhaps drying off a bit more, particularly in the south and east for Saturday, and we'll also see those temperatures climbing back up towards 16 degrees. Bye-bye.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us four, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's 10 a.m. Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Dawn Neeson.
Yeah, that's me. Touchdown in Belfast. Joe Biden has arrived in Northern Ireland and pledged to secure the future of the Good Friday Agreement and the Winter Framework.
Not that he's going to be there for very long. Get back to work. Downing Street says there'll be no pay talks with junior doctors unless they drop that 35% pay rise. And of course, one of the strike leaders has gone on holiday to Greece. Very nice.
He hasn't got much to do, Andrew. Cut the man some slack at home. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is meeting world leaders in a bid to avoid a new global financial crisis. This all comes as the IMF predicts the UK will be the poorest performing big economy this year. What does it mean for the pound in your pocket? Stay with us to find out.
And is it going to be coronation chaos? The Daily Mirror suggests it might be. I'm not so sure, but there is no doubt a problem because Harry and Meghan, guess what, still haven't said whether they're attending the coronation, which is now just 3 weeks away.
Right, let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points today. Email us at gbnews@gbnews.uk. But first, here's your morning news with Bethany Elsey.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. The US President will hold talks with the Prime Minister on the first full day of his visit to Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Joe Biden was greeted by Rishi Sunak as he landed in Belfast last night amid a major security operation. 300 police officers have been drafted in from the rest of the UK. He'll also meet the main political leaders in Stormont ahead of his speech at Ulster University later. The 4-day trip coincides with the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, but it also comes as devolved power sharing in the region remains collapsed. Biden said supporting the recent Windsor framework, which was agreed to ease post-Brexit trade barriers, was one of his top priorities. His fifth cousin, Andrea McKivitt, told us she can't wait to meet him.
It's going to be like a big family reunion today when he gets back to Louth, I think, and there's a real sense of euphoria already and a great buzz about Carlingford and in Dundalk. You know, there's lots of different events planned, there's children drawing posters and, you know, people getting their faces painted, and I've got my badge here, my cousin Joe badge. Like, it's just, everyone's gone a bit crazy about the prospect of meeting the President.
Thousands of junior doctors are striking for a second day. Members of the British Medical Association are staging 4 days of industrial action this week, saying they have no other choice. But Health Secretary Steve Barclay is accusing the BMA of putting patients at greater risk after not agreeing any national exemptions for some services, such as cancer care. Downing Street is refusing to hold further talks with the union unless they abandon the 35% pay rise demand, which they say could cost the taxpayer £2 billion. Labour is pledging to get our high streets thriving again by cutting business rates and energy bills. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves are in Great Yarmouth today to launch its new 5-point plan. Under new measures, the party will support energy efficiency measures. And the Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Jonathan Reynolds, says they'll also pay 13,000 more neighbourhood police.
Now, our plan is to centralise some of the procurement in police forces, use that saving to put over extra 10,000 more additional neighbourhood officers on the street. Crime and things takes time, but some of those changes to the tax system, to the incentives, they could be done by government very quickly if the political will was there to do that. And all it's about is making sure there's a more competitive environment, just tilting the balance a little bit in favour of the kind of people you're talking about, so we can have the kind of vibrant high streets, which I think everybody wants, but at the minute, it's fair to say we're not getting.
The Ministry of Defence says there is a serious level of inaccuracy in alleged leaked documents which claim UK Special Forces have operated in Ukraine. Reports suggest that as many as 50 personnel have been deployed alongside other Western forces, although the locations and missions have not been revealed. The classified US documents may have been released on the chat room of the social media platform Discord. The MOD is warning the leak has the potential to spread disinformation. A new study shows the cost of childcare in the UK is forcing 1 in 4 parents to give up their job or education. Global children's charity Their World has found 74% of parents say they find it difficult to meet the costs. It's calling on governments to urgently prioritise spending on the early years programmes. It's found 23% had either quit work or dropped out of studies to avoid childcare costs. Winds of up to 70 miles an hour are set to sweep across the UK today, with unsettled weather forecast over the coming days too. Yellow warnings are in place for the south of England, the south of Wales and all of Northern Ireland. With heavy rain predicted, 8 flood alerts remain in place across southern England as well. The Met Office is urging motorists to take care with difficult driving conditions expected. In the US, 500 acres have been destroyed as a huge forest fire continues to spread across New Jersey. Aerial footage has captured the dramatic scenes in the east of the state. Authorities say only 10% of the blaze has been contained since yesterday evening, and nearby residents have been ordered to evacuate. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Holidaymakers are being warned to look out for scam travel deals amid passport delays. The Chartered Trading Standards Institute says scammers are tricking potential travellers into paying for holidays and services that don't even exist. Methods include using social media ads with too good to be true prices. And England's women's football team has ended their 30-game unbeaten run after losing 2-0 to Australia last night. The defeat was the first since Serena Wiegman took over. The Lionesses' boss says she hasn't been focused on the streak and that the team just wants to win every game. The squad will now start gearing towards the World Cup, taking place in the summer. You're up to date on GB News now. It's back to Dawn and Andrew.
A big day in Northern Ireland. The US President, Joe Biden,
Evidently.
is there. He's going to be meeting with leaders of Northern Ireland parties this morning.
He was greeted last night on the steps of Air Force One by the Prime Minister, who he will hold bilateral talks with later today.
He's also going to visit Ulster University to deliver a short speech before heading to the Republic of Ireland, which, frankly, seems to me the whole point of his visit.
Isn't that where his cousins live? Right, joining us now for more on this, not necessarily his cousins, but the rest of it, is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Doogie, good morning to you. Doogie, it looks very lovely and sunny there. I mean, what's the atmosphere like? Have you seen Joe Biden yet?
No, we've seen the cavalcade about quite a bit, but we haven't seen Joe Biden. We've seen all the security, about £7 million worth, it appears to be, of security, as we were hearing, 300 extra officers brought in from other forces the whole way across the UK. He's on the ground for about 18 hours. He's probably spending more time at his breakfast this morning than he will actually talking to the 5 parties, because if you add all the time up, he's due to have a meeting with Rishi Sunak just about now. Then he's going to meet the 5 parties, 5 leaders, and then he's coming here to the University of Ulster. He'll probably have about an hour here, and then he's gone. He's away to Dublin straight away. So is it really going to make any difference to Northern Ireland and to the peace agreement that is under pressure here at the moment? It was interesting to hear Tony Blair last night comment not to meddle too much. It was very much advice, but sounded quite like a warning, and not to try and force unionists into power, because that would go quite badly for them. And of course, we've been saying that all along, that they're trying to bounce the DUP and unionists in general back into power because of this framework document. That hasn't worked well for them. I think the pressure that has come to bear on them has been very, very high, and today this is the pinnacle of that very issue. Joe Biden has had a very low level support here. There's no thousands of crowds. There's lots of barriers out for crowds, but quite literally standing here at the minute, I think I could count about 15 people. So it just shows you where Northern Ireland is, either with the whole peace process or with a US president arriving. The interesting thing, of course, is that Bill Clinton, the man that was right at the forefront of the Good Friday Agreement, is speaking in Queen's University later on today. That will probably steal the show here and probably send crowds that direction. It will be interesting to see what happens with that. But definitely for Joe Biden on the ground, not much support, and he will be gone from here in round about 3 hours' time.
Right, that's Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie. Let's talk to GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey, who's just outside Ulster University. Darren, morning. Often a Prime Minister will get a bit of a bounce by being shoulder to shoulder with the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, but to be honest, Rishi Sunak's going to be with him just for a few minutes, and it's already descended into a joke about, is it a bilateral or is it a latte? Because he's just having coffee with him.
Yeah, indeed, but it is interesting, though, that Rishi Sunak has made a concerted effort to try and associate himself with Joe Biden. He turned up at the airport last night to greet him off Air Force One, and as you say, he's having this kind of almost brush by, the technical term, for a very brief chat this morning. The Prime Minister didn't need to come to Northern Ireland to make that effort. He clearly felt that he needed to. Now, why is that? Well, it's the third meeting he's had with Joe Biden since he became Prime Minister, and he's only been Prime Minister for 6 months, and that's pretty good going, I would suggest. And I think it's fair to say that actually both men thus far get on pretty well. I mean, they spent an hour in the same room together with no officials when they met in San Diego, just a month or so ago, over that AUKUS deal. And also, I think there has been a concerted attempt by Downing Street to repair relations with the White House. They frankly have not been terribly good since particularly Brexit. It is fair to say that the Americans have kind of essentially felt, and we know this during the Obama administration certainly, that the Brexit was a mistake. Boris Johnson failed to capitalise on the relationship with Donald Trump. So Rishi Sunak is trying again, and it seems somewhat successfully. But in saying that, I think, as you guys have alluded to, he is frankly in Northern Ireland for 18 hours. Now, let's be honest about that. That is frankly largely Northern Ireland's fault. We do not have a government here. There is no executive for all the reasons that we know are available. It is fair to say that if politics was back to normal here, Joe Biden will be spending a hell of a lot more time in Northern Ireland. But yes, the focus of his trip is clearly on the rest of Ireland. He's meeting his ancestors a little later on today, and indeed later on in the week in 2 counties in the Republic of Ireland, spending most of his time in Dublin, including addressing both Houses of Parliament, the Irish Parliament down there, and having a state banquet with the Irish President. Let's remind people that there are tens of millions, I think 40 million Americans who associate themselves with Ireland, who think they've got Irish heritage, and for a man who may well be seeking re-election, that's one hell of an electoral base to try and win over next time rounds.
I would just say finally, Dan, that's going to put the unionist nose a bit out of joint, isn't it? Addressing both Houses of Parliament in Ireland, a state banquet, but spending barely an hour with the unionist politicians
Having a cup of coffee.
Having a coffee.
Yeah, I think so, but, you know, Joe Biden was invited to speak to Stormont and to the Assembly, but he turned that down because, well, it doesn't really exist, does it? I mean, and there is a frustration here. You know, you talk to people in Northern Ireland, and Dougie's right, this is not Bill Clinton in 1995, and this place is used to seeing US presidents. They've all visited, apart from Donald Trump, in the last 20 years. Even George W. Bush was here twice as president. There are very few people on the streets. There's not many people terribly excited about this visit, but what I would say is there is a frustration here amongst all sections of the community that Stormont is not up and running. And I do suspect that while the DUP, particularly at the moment, is resisting returning into government, there are local elections, let's not forget this, in May. There's clearly concern about how the Windsor framework may play out in terms of those local elections, with the support for the DUP, which has slipped in recent years. Once those elections are out of the way, I think there'll be a proper rethink within unionism, particularly within the DUP, about getting Stormont up and running again. Because I say, irrespective of what people think, at the end of the day, people here do want local politicians making those local decisions.
Right, that's our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's outside Ulster University. Thanks for joining us, Darren.
Thank you, Darren. You know what? I'm feeling incredibly cynical about this, aren't you? I feel dreadfully sorry for people in Northern Ireland that Stormont hasn't operated for over a year now. No decisions are being made. Nothing is being done. And
this presidential visit's not going to make anything change.
It's not going to make any difference, but he gets to meet his cousins.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can understand why no one's out there with their flags and sort of like, you know,
It's interesting to see how many turn out in Ireland.
It will be, won't it? But he's going to be there for a bit longer, so people will have a chance at least.
But I have to say, I'm still looking forward to seeing Bill Clinton. I saw him once when he came to the Labour Party conference when he was the former president and Tony Blair was Prime Minister. It was electric, the atmosphere.
I can imagine.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, and this is completely different, isn't it? It really is.
He had rock star status, Clinton,
yes, no, absolutely.
in his pomp.
Yes, and it will be interesting to see the reaction there, because there isn't one at the moment, is there? Right, we move on. I'm sure we'll be coming back to that.
Sure we will.
Yeah, absolutely, when he's met his cousins. A structure which has become synonymous with rust. The Blackfriars Bridge crossing, don't look at me when I say that, crossing the River Thames in London is long overdue a makeover.
It's been nearly 23 years since it was last, if you pardon the expression, touched up a little, and our GB News reporter Lisa Harter went to see how the latest restoration efforts are coming along.
Bridging the River Thames since 1869, Blackfriars Bridge was first opened by Queen Victoria. Over time, the paint has faded and rust is setting in, so a 3-year restoration project is underway.
It's the traffic that uses the bridge has completely changed. The bridge was widened in 1903 and there were trams on it. So the bridge is now dealing with things that it didn't have to deal with when it was originally made. What we're hoping to do is protect the structure of it, and also the really ornate metal work and the cast iron work that we see on the front of the bridge and on the top of the bridge, so that it can continue for decades to come.
2,168 bolsters form part of the bridge. Each one has to be removed, restored and then replaced again. This just looks like really boring graffiti.
Absolutely.
Someone who loves maths that loves graffitiing.
Every single one of these balusters gets identified individually. So when we take it away, we know exactly where it came from. We know exactly where it's going to go back to.
Tiniest ladders ever. With the slowest ladder descent of my life, we climb down the side of the bridge. So I'm sat literally on the lip of the bridge, if that's the term, lip of the bridge, and the rest of the bridge is up here, and below me, these feet below this wooden thing is the Thames. So this is a big structure that's all been built so that this part of the bridge can all be repainted, and I'm going to use a technical term now, things like the what I like to call a giant's button can be re-gilded with gold, because it's all been prepared and ready for that to happen.
Further down we climbed and found ourselves underneath the bridge.
This has pretty much been finished, so it's all lovely and glossy and shiny. But to give you an idea of the scale of it, there are 10 other bays of this to be complete, that have still got to complete for just this span. So the width of the bridge is huge, and you can probably appreciate that the bulk of the work is actually painting the underside of the bridge in this fantastic white.
So you've got a lot of pigeons to evict that way now?
They're slowly making their way out, yeah.
Before we headed back out of the temporary labyrinth, there was one more thing Tom wanted to show us.
We're now on the upstream side, so these are the freshwater birds, which are just fantastic, ornate carvings. These are all original, so they've been looking over the Thames for 153 years. They form part of the pier, and they're supposed to look like a pulpit on the top, and it's a nod to the Blackfriars Monastery, which the bridge is named after.
Oh, to get people going up there with bottles of water to get christened.
I've not seen it, but I wouldn't put it past them.
The refurbishment, which is taking 3 years, is costing £15 million.
This is being funded by Bridge House Estates, and this is a charity that's existed for over 900 years now, and it owns the bridges of the City of London. There are 5 bridges, and this is the oldest of the bridges.
The work is set to be completed by summer next year. Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
Fascinating. Now we've
I
got
thought
some
it was
fascinating
fascinating. And thank you
views
very much for
coming in
referring to me as an old ruin that needed a restoration
Yes,
as well,
indeed.
Andrew.
Look,
That
I
went
love
quite
this
well.
message from Alan, Andy, who says, let Biden sort his own country out first. There are mass shootings there virtually once a week. What's he doing here?
Well, exactly. And I think there's a lot of cynicism in the room as well. Biden is visiting his mother's. This is from Mel. Good morning, Mel. Biden is visiting his mother's ancestral home in the south and spending more time doing this than in Northern Ireland, as we've just discussed. How much time will he be spending visiting his father's ancestral home in England? Well, this is the point. He's not coming to the coronation, is he?
He's not. And Alan says Biden's like the majority of Americans. They think they're John Wayne in The Quiet Man. Great film, of course. When they go to Ireland, and basically he's taken his family with him at the country's expense on a family jolly. No interest in Northern Ireland at all. He's taken his sister and his son.
Well, as Sean points out, good morning, Sean. Well, that's right. Biden's son Hunter is with him. Well, we know why, because it's a family visit. Considering the scandal around him, she is surprised.
Yeah, well, there is a lot of scandal.
Yes.
Now, still to come, we're going to have more reaction to the IMF, who aren't very good at predictions, frankly, nevertheless predicting that Britain will have the worst economy in the G7, along with Germany. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning, welcome back. It's 10:23. You're with To The Point on GB News with the lovely Andrew Pearce and me, Dawn Neeson.
Well, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt's in Washington. He's meeting world leaders in a bid, they say, to avoid a global financial crisis.
How's that going? The IMF is holding spring meetings as it forecasts that the UK will be the worst performing G7 economy this year.
Well, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan's in the studio. Liam, I'm not the expert that you are, but the IMF don't have a great record on making economic predictions, do
So I've been going back through the archives this morning, and out of the IMF's last 28 predictions about the UK economy, how many do you think were too pessimistic?
26.
25. 25 out of 28.
How interesting.
Pretty astonishing.
Is it an anti-British prejudice, or is it because of Brexit?
I think it's partly because of Brexit, if I'm honest. The IMF, for a lot of that period, was run by a French lawyer, very much a sort of European Union, European Central Bank creation. She now runs the European Central Bank, which, of course, is the Eurozone's central bank. And yet the British economy keeps springing back. Let's have a look at this latest forecast that's just come out. You can see here that the UK is, according to the IMF, these are the growth forecasts for 2023, the slowest growing of all the major economies in the world there. The IMF, though, was saying that we would grow, or we would shrink by 0.6% this year, our gross domestic product, but now we're only going to shrink by 0.3%. So we are actually the most improved in terms of their previous forecasts and their current forecasts. They've upgraded us more than any other economy, but they're still saying that the economy will contract and the UK will go into recession. Well, of course, the Office for Budget Responsibility has been saying that for months. The Bank of England has been saying that for months. And now the OBR and the Bank of England are finally changing their tune. What I would say about these IMF forecasts is I don't only think that they're kind of instinctively anti-Brexit Britain. I really think they are. But I'd also say that they're weeks out of date. There are so many layers of bureaucracy at the IMF. I used to actually work at the IMF in another life. And it's so political, this forecasting. It has to go through so many committee hands that these numbers are at least weeks out of date, probably months.
I'm just saying, sorry, Don, this comes on the day Liz Truss is in America making a big speech saying that the Thatcherite legacy is being squandered. She says we should be cutting taxes. She's got a point, hasn't she?
A few big speeches out of Washington today by prominent Brits, Andrew. You've got Liz Truss giving a Margaret Thatcher Memorial Lecture at the Heritage Foundation, which is a centre-right think tank. She's long had ties with that, and that will be reported widely. But I think what will attract more attention, there are two speeches today from Washington by Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England. You know, so many people now are wondering what's going to happen on interest rates.
Yeah.
As it happens, there's an inflation number coming out on Wednesday next week, which will probably be in single digits. We're at 10.4% at the moment for the Consumer Price Index. But there is no interest rate meeting this month. There are only 8 a year. They're not monthly. There are 8 a year. So they're regular meetings, but not monthly. So we're going to have to wait until May before there's another interest rate decision. And by then, it may be that if inflation is coming down, interest rates may not rise. And another reason interest rates may not rise, and a lot of the talk out of the World Bank IMF meetings this spring, today, will be about this, is the fact that there's increasing concern about the global banking system and the impact of higher interest rates on the balance sheet of banks. We've seen major banks topple over, not least, of course, Credit Suisse. So it may be the best possible outcome is if there's enough fear about the banking system that interest rates don't go up anymore and inflation's coming down, but then the banking system doesn't actually topple over, because we don't want to go into a sort of 2008-style situation.
Well, they're not predicting that one yet, are they?
They're not, but they are, Dawn, briefing the front of newspapers. Yeah, there's no reason to say that you're having a conversation about how to save the banking system. I reckon they're putting that out there so there's an excuse to not to avoid raising interest rates. Because if central banks don't raise interest rates when inflation's still high, their credibility takes a battering.
But
they can give a kind of justification for not raising
people. They think, oh my God, we're
it's a mind game.
Queuing outside Northern Rock to get our money out the bank.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Going back to your chart, Liam, they have predicted Germany's in trouble as well. So
yeah, Germany has major. You don't hear much about it in the media here. Germany has had major strikes. The German economy, of course, is hugely dependent on Russian energy, even more than our economy is. In fairness to the IMF, they are right to say that the UK is vulnerable because of our dependence on imported energy still, though we are importing a lot more of the gas we use, not just from Norway, but from the US, that liquefied natural gas that we've started to use a lot more. So the IMF have got some good points. You know, they don't completely make stuff up. It's all about the top spin that's put on these forecasts. So yet again, I think it will be 26 out of 29 IMF forecasts, which will be seen as too pessimistic, in my view.
Because reading about them this morning, they seem to, when things are jogging along quite nicely, they're sort of on sort of like...
Yeah, but that's easy, isn't it?
Yeah, but when there's a major financial problem like the recessions we've had, they miss that.
They do. What's Jeremy Hunt doing out there today, the Chancellor?
Jeremy Hunt will be glad-handing, representing the UK. These World Bank IMF meetings, there are 2 a year. They're quite a big deal. They're the kind of powwow of finance ministers around the world. But I think what he'll also be doing is trying to ignore any noises off from Liz Truss just down the road.
So how close is the Heritage Foundation from
I think it's just a couple of hundred metres, actually.
Be popping in for a cup of tea together?
Yes, his former cabinet colleague, our shortest-served Prime Minister in history. Has she still got the ability, in your view, Liam, to make waves?
I think she can... I think what she said before the budget about corporation tax did move the needle. You will know, Andrew, that she's currently setting up a think tank. She's recruiting economists for that think tank. She's got funding for that think tank. Look, there's a lot of people in British business and a lot of people out there watching and listening to GB News who just think the burden of taxation is too high.
They're right.
Because it is at a 70-year high. And whatever you think about Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, that was the point they were trying to make.
They just did it too quickly, didn't they?
Well, I think future historians will judge that not only did they try and do too much too soon and they didn't take the room with them, they didn't lay the ground the way, say, Nigel Lawson laid the ground before his major tax reductions from 60 to 40%, the top rate of tax. But I also think the Bank of England itself didn't cover itself in glory at all, because it started basically selling bonds back to the market in a sort of reverse quantitative easing the day before the Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng mini-budget. That wasn't the right day to do that. And there was almost a kind of...
saboteur, some people
Well, that's a strong word, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the central bank were really pleased to see Liz Truss go and greeted, plain vanilla Treasury man Jeremy Hunt with open arms. They didn't like Truss and Kwarteng because they wanted to shake things up. But Truss and Kwarteng played into the hands of the blob, if you like, by not laying the ground.
Liam, can you just, one final thing, just reassure people out there, because, they're not accurate, the IMF forecasts. The media get very excited about it and do the scaremongering things. People listening now going, oh, my God, it's going to be terrible. But as you said...
let me say this, Dawn. Forecasts aren't destiny. No one can predict... they say economic forecasting is difficult, particularly when it's about the future. No one knows where the economy is going. I mean, most economic forecasting, take this from a former professional economic forecaster, is a bit of... and an awful lot of mathematical hocus-pocus. What I would say is there are people out there who are better at economic forecasting than others, and there are institutions who I would say have a kind of institutional bias, particularly against the UK at the moment. And I would say that the IMF is one of them. Absolutely. I was recently up in Walsall. I'm bringing a film out later in this week on GB News. An absolutely fabulous company up in Walsall, employing 230 people, a manufacturer, and they are powering through. We have some great entrepreneurs in this country. We have a lot of resilience. We still attract a huge amount of inward investment. The cost of living squeeze is still with us, but we will prevail.
Absolutely. So don't worry. Actually, nice positive note to end on. Other countries are in, you know, not in just a bad state, but other countries are doing worse. We just don't get to hear about it.
Germany even worse than us.
Constantly kicking ourselves. We should stop doing it.
I'm not taking any satisfaction from the fact Germany are worse than us. Well, perhaps not much satisfaction.
Not much satisfaction. No, not much at all. Right, in any case, we have to move on. Still to come. Should under-16s be allowed to have mobile phones? Find out after your morning news with Bethany Elsey.
Thanks very much. Here's your latest headlines from the GB newsroom at 10:32. The US President will hold talks with the Prime Minister on the first full day of his visit to Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Joe Biden was greeted by Rishi Sunak as he landed in Belfast last night. He's due to meet the main political leaders in Stormont too, ahead of his speech at Ulster University later. The four-day trip coincides with the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. It also comes as devolved power sharing in the region remains collapsed over post-Brexit trade concerns. Biden said supporting the Windsor framework is one of his top priorities. Thousands of junior doctors are striking for a second day today. Members of the British Medical Association are staging 4 days of industrial action this week, saying they have no other choice. But Health Secretary Steve Barclay is accusing the BMA of putting patients at greater risk after not agreeing any national exemptions for some services, such as cancer care. Downing Street is refusing to hold further talks with the union unless they abandon the 35% pay rise demand. Junior doctor Melissa Ryan told GB News the increase is needed to retain staff.
Every week, somebody from Canada or New Zealand or Australia sends me an offer and they say, look, we will pay you better, you'll have shorter working hours. And then when you've been here and you're working, sometimes my working week is 70 hours a week. And in conditions where I'm covering the job of 2 doctors, I can understand why people would make that choice. I would like to stay for the NHS. I hope that the doctors stay for the NHS, but I really do believe that we need our pay addressed.
Labour is pledging to get our high streets thriving again by cutting business rates and energy bills. The Labour leader and Shadow Chancellor are in Great Yarmouth today to launch the new 5-point plan. It includes the introduction of vouchers for energy efficiency measures, such as double glazing, heat pumps and electric cars. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.242 and 1.137 euros. The price of gold is £1,617.88 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,831 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, investments that matter.
When we return, there's reports that King Charles and Camilla experienced last-minute problems ahead of their big day, the coronation. And it guess revolves around guess who?
Ooh, what a surprise, Harry and Meghan.
This is To The Point.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, welcome back. It's 10:38. This is To The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Dawn Neeson.
And we're going to go to some of the headlines in the papers today. Big part of the show. We've got brilliant Patrick O'Flynn, columnist and political commentator, and Kevin Schofield, political editor of the HuffPost UK. Gentlemen, Kevin, you're going to go first, aren't you? I love this story in my paper, The Mail. It's driving me nuts. And Dawn, too.
It is, yeah.
And I imagine Patrick as well.
Can I just point out, while we're talking about our papers, I'm on the front page of my paper today. You don't get on the front page of yours that often, do you?
Not that often.
No. That's a Daily Star.
She does
Is
like
it there?
to
I'm there on the front page. Thank you very much for my new column.
Right.
Better than his column. Just saying. Any case, no one selected that for a newspaper story. Bitterly disappointed. So what one are we doing?
Sorry about that, Dawn. So this is quite an intriguing story, actually. This is a French warship had to tell a Channel ferry, P&O Channel ferry, basically to get out the way because it was escorting migrants trying to get to Dover. Now, it was dense fog, so it was particularly dangerous, quite a dangerous manoeuvre, actually, and the ferry refused to go the way that the French warship wanted them to go because it was so foggy. So instead of going port, they went starboard. Anyway, to cut a long story short, this, I think, the political angle of this, really, it shows how difficult it's going to be for Rishi Sunak to achieve this stop the boats commitment. Because if we've got a situation where the French are quite happy to escort these boats to Britain, then how on earth is he going to manage to stop the boats? Now, I thought that he had reached some sort of accord with the French. We're giving the French quite a lot of money.
480 million over 3 years.
To try and help, as I say, achieve this ambition of stopping the boats. But if this is the type of thing that's going on, it's going to be virtually impossible.
Patrick, it seems that the moment a boat's in the water, the French are not going to try and put it back. They're going to help it get into British waters, and then it's our problem.
Yes, absolutely, which is why I think that the French aspect of what Sunak's doing is window dressing. If the French wanted to stop the cross-channel migrants, they could just do one simple thing which would cost them almost nothing, which is to say, any migrants you pick up mid-channel we'll take back. And that would complete... So all this investment in extra police controls on hundreds of miles...
Because they don't want them back, do they? They don't want them back.
No,
That's the reality.
Indeed. So I think as well it looks really bad for Rishi Sunak because it reminds people we're actually part of a water taxi service. We are actively escorting these guys onto the south coast of England. We had the Mail story the other day about 19 Islamist terrorists are among them. I think the Sun a few weeks ago had that 1,000 of them have been alleged to have been involved in criminality in their own countries. It's just a terrible look. So the key thing for Rishi Sunak, he has to get this standard deportation back to country of origin or to a third country like Rwanda up and running. That's the only thing that's going to stop people paying £2,000 and £3,000.
The Rwanda thing, I just think quite literally.
Kelly, what do you hear politically? Is it ever going to happen?
I mean,
it has to for him politically.
Well, it has
the Prime Minister.
I mean, it's unequivocal. The commitment. It's not reduce the boats. It's stop the boats. Now they're prevaricating a little bit on the deadline. Is it within 12 months? Is it by the time of the next general election?
I thought it was by the end of this year.
By the end of the calendar year, exactly. They're very vague on all 5 promises, actually, as to when you're meant to hold them to account. But even if we just give them benefit of the doubt and say by the next election, I think even then, assuming it's 18 months away, the idea that there'll be no boats at all crossing the channel by October 2024, I think, is pretty optimistic.
Patrick, what credence do you give to the idea that the election would be in October next year because there'll be fewer boats crossing the channel, in theory?
Well, I don't think that's the reason. I think October has been talked about for a while as the more likely date. That's, to my view, that's to give the economy a bit more time to improve. Actually, last year, September, October proved to be the peak season.
It did, because the weather was particularly good, wasn't it?
So it's very high risk. So that could really hijack a Tory election campaign unless the boats have been disincentivised because this standard deportation has come into effect, in which case it's not worth anyone's money to pay £2,000 to a people smuggler to get across the channel. So
how would that standard deportation come into effect?
Well, because the illegal migration bill going through Parliament would have come onto the statute. But we think perhaps the European Court of Human Rights might pragmatically sort of take a step back because they do know we have a Home Secretary, at least, who wants to leave their jurisdiction. And Rishi Sunak has said all means necessary to stop the boats.
Well, we've ignored them before.
We have.
Ignored them on prisoners' votes.
We have. But I think on terms of timescale and when these pledges come into effect, I mean, Judgment Day is the general election. If the Tories go in to the next general election with still tens of thousands of people crossing, they really are toast because the Tory voters will not come out to vote.
It's frightening, and it's being an ongoing debate, and I just honestly can't see it happening. We're just going to come back to you, gentlemen. We have to go to another story very briefly. Phones for under-16s should be banned with tobacco-style health warnings stuck on the packaging, campaigners say.
Well, good luck with that, because who's going to tell teenagers they can't have a phone? This is the parent group Us For Them claims smartphones can make children distracted, isolated and depressed because of the addictive apps.
OK, well, let's speak to co-founder of Us For Them, Molly Kingsley. Good morning, Molly. Hi, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Right, Molly, look, in theory, it's a great idea, but let's be honest, it's never going to work. Have you ever tried taking a phone away from a teenager?
Yeah, and look, let's be really clear. I don't think that's what we're saying here. We're not saying that kids who have phones need them stripped. We are saying it's a really serious problem. It is. No one disagrees with that. Parents are failing. As a society, we're failing. We are setting children ourselves a terrible example in how we use our phones. And I think really as parents, we are asking for help. So, my instinct, and I think the instinct of many parents, is naturally towards a more libertarian attitude, perhaps with adults. But I think when it comes to child safety, we have to look at where we are. And, 91% of our 11-year-olds now own a smartphone. On average, they use that device for 3 hours and 20 minutes a day. 1 in 4 children now uses their phone in a way that is consistent with a behavioural addiction. This is dire. It's really, really dire. And it's having a profound impact on children and childhood. And it's time, I think, as a society that we start treating this a very, very addictive product in the same way we treat other potentially addictive and dangerous products. Cigarettes is the obvious one, gambling. We don't let children do these things for a reason. We are meant to protect our kids, and we're failing to do that.
Molly, can I just playing devil's advocate here slightly, provided there is parental control and you limit how long younger children in particular spend on their phones, what is the harm? Surely they can be a good educational tool as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good question. And I think you can envisage a world, and in fact, our campaign does do this, and the campaign is www.safescreens.org. We don't call for an outright ban. We do envisage a world where the devices could be made safe with very strict controls. But we are so far away from that. And I do think you have a question about whether that is possible given the vast array of content available on the devices. Because, of course, if you're really going to control the product for the child, you get into a whole different world of pain, don't you, with, controlling the content for adults and free speech. Yet, personally, I think it might be possible to have a device that is just a separate child-friendly device. So, it's a different phone, it has different controls. But we're not there yet, and there's no talk of that. And at the moment, we have a potentially dangerous and very addictive product that is out of control.
Molly, one story I did notice earlier on this week was actress Sophie Winkleman, who twice removed her children from actual school because they were given iPads at 6 years old. I mean, is this part of your campaign as well?
It is. So we do say they need to come out, smartphones need to come out of schools immediately. We haven't actually said iPads. We thought about that. We thought it would be a bridge too far. We think there's a real problem. It's clearly a real problem with EdTech. And actually, I see it with my own 6-year-old, who now increasingly is being given homework on the iPad. And it turns out this is computer games. So, the schools, for whatever reason, are becoming complicit, I think, in using this ed tech that is rolled out as a great benefit and a virtue and an automatic. And obviously there probably is a benefit to teachers at least. But actually, for the kids, you have to argue, what is it teaching a 6-year-old? My 6-year-old needs to learn to write and read. She needs to learn to use a pen. And yet, here she is swiping on an iPad. There's a really interesting story today, actually, about 3- and 4-year-olds. I don't know if you saw that, but according to Ofcom, a quarter of 3- and 4-year-olds now have smartphones. And actually, this raises huge concerns developmentally, both from socialization, but also speech and language. There's a speech and language therapist that says really concerns her that when this age cohort see screens and see a picture, their natural instinct is to swipe on the picture.
Molly, thank you. That's absolutely terrifying, to be honest with you. That's Molly Kingsley, co-founder of Us For Them. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Let's go back to the papers of Patrick O'Flynn and Kevin Scovey. Let's talk about another issue about parents. Harry Potter star Daniel Radcliffe. Tell us what he's been saying, Patrick.
Well, I always take the view with actors that they're people who come to prominence and success by saying words that other people have written for them.
Yes.
Very good point.
And they get into trouble when they start voicing their own original thoughts. Now, Daniel Radcliffe, aged 33. We believe, by the way, that he's expecting a child with his partner.
Right.
So he's not a parent yet, so I would say, Daniel, give it 15 years and we might listen to what you say. But what his point is that children should be trusted to express their gender identity. And we obviously have seen great surge in the number of children who've got, gender dysphoria, gender confusion, who lean towards the feeling they might be trapped in the wrong body. And Daniel Radcliffe's answer is just believe them and presumably, therefore, do what they say, do what they and their friends have decided would be the right thing.
Knows all about it. But he's also saying, isn't he, that parents who don't respect that wish are condescending. And it's not a word to use.
Absolutely. So, as I say, let's hope when his child comes, there are no issues or problems at all. But, he may learn the fundamental role of a parent is not necessarily to be Mr. and Mrs. Popular, but to take the decisions.
Speak from experience.
Well, indeed, particularly unpopular, I would say. But you take the decisions that you think are in the best interests of your child because you have an adult mind, an adult responsibility, and they are children. So I'm afraid this is a case of an actor
Kevin, the trouble I have with this story, it is an amazing story, and obviously, apart from the fact that, once again, he is poking the tiger, that is the great J.K. Rowling, who you could argue actually made him famous and made him the millionaire that he is. But the problem is, he's saying, young children can decide on their gender, their parents have to accept that. But, we don't let children below the age of 16 and 18, depending on what we're talking about, have tattoos, drink alcohol, get married. So why does Daniel Radcliffe think it's OK that they can choose their gender? The parents have to listen to that child. I mean, surely the parents are the ones that have to be in control here?
Ultimately, yeah, and it is difficult being a parent these days, I would say, speaking as somebody who is a parent of 2 young girls. And, we were just talking to the lady there about mobile phones. I mean, that in itself is really tough. Try to get them to part company with their iPad.
Would you dare try?
Well, I have tried, not entirely successfully,
right.
I have to say. So it's difficult, and I think these days we tend, as parents, maybe to be a little bit more less challenging than my parents were, maybe your parents.
Sure, my parents are very challenging.
We are much more willing to listen to their views and try to meet them halfway rather than laying down the law. And I think this is just another example of where it's much tougher now, I think, than it was even.
And Patrick's making the point, of course, when he's a dad, he might see things differently.
Well, that is the same. I mean, I know that myself. I had my views on parenting were, well, I was clueless, really, before I became a parent myself. You have all these opinions about how mums and dads should behave until you actually have a kid yourself, and then all bets are off.
Were you clueless, Patrick?
Very different.
I think all new parents are.
Sure.
There's no
You're
experience.
learning, aren't
Everyone goes into parenthood with their own preconceptions, and it's like the military say that no plan survives the first minute of contact with the enemy. Not as though I'm saying all children are the enemy.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Not always, anyway.
Talking of, well, my dad asked me to leave home as soon as he could, so
not surprising, really.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So let's talking of problem children. Let's mention the royals and the problem child there, one Harry. King's coronation plunged into turmoil by a catalogue of late problems.
Yes.
I don't think it's turmoil, but I think it's flipping rude and discourteous of those two, don't you?
Yes, well, this is a day, and I think we might describe it as a sort of mini silly season, because Parliament's not sitting.
That's right.
It's still Easter, and every newspaper has a different front page headline. The Mirror has managed to come up with quite an interesting
Coronation chaos fear.
Coronation chaos, and part of it relates to the fact that Harry and Meghan haven't yet said whether they're coming. Apparently, Prince Andrew is griping about what robes he'll be allowed to wear.
Dear.
They say there's a worry about the long robe the King will wear and mighty trip over. The rehearsal slightly overran, but that's why you have rehearsals, isn't it? So there's all these elements that the Mirror has whipped up. I think we get this before any long-planned major event, like the Olympics in 2012. I predict the coronation will be a triumph, and no one will care whether Harry's there or not.
It's what they do so well, don't they?
Pomp and
ceremony. Nobody does it better, and this will be a triumph.
It will be, I think we're in that zone at the moment where it's 2 or 3 weeks till it happens. You've got to fill the paper somehow. So, you drum up a bit of chaos.
Do you care about Harry and Meghan being at the coronation?
Not especially.
You know what?
Do you care?
In defence of my industry, it sells newspapers.
Yeah.
It still does. And, I'm very critical of Harry and Meghan, and I don't want it to be all about them.
Good, well said.
So let's stop talking about them then. Move on, shall we?
But we might talk about it a bit later too. But you boys are coming back.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. Right, up next, we'll have more from the upcoming meeting between Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir with your weather update this Wednesday. Wind warnings remain in force across the south as well as the west, with some heavy rain around and also some blustery showers. Let's pick up on those warning zones through today. Low pressure firmly in charge. We'll see gales, perhaps even severe gales for a time across more southern and western parts of England and Wales, particularly along the coast. And the wind warning from 11 o'clock across Belfast and much of Northern Ireland. Again, some strong gusty winds. A swirl of cloud and rain. That rain turns heavy, extending across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the Isle of Man. And this batch here extends from Wales and the West Country up towards much of England and Wales. Sunshine and showers towards the northeast and the eastern side of the country. They could be heavy, and a keen breeze for Shetland. Temperatures will struggle as we head into the latter part of the day. Now, low pressure remains firmly dominant through Wednesday night and into Thursday. However, we lose a lot of the rain anywhere from Wales down towards the Midlands, the southeast, showers for the southwest of England, and some heavy bursts likely across Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Wind still will be a feature of the weather across the southwest of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, through Thursday, the morning will be wet across the northern half of the UK and further showers across the far southwest, in between some sunshine. But as the sun gets gets to work, we will see some scattered showers through the day, and they could turn out to be heavy. So it's sunshine and showers on Thursday, winds not as strong, and temperatures a couple of degrees higher, making it feel a little bit warmer. Here's a snapshot of Friday. More rain across more southern areas on Friday. A quieter day all round, anywhere from northern England, eastern England, Northern Ireland, as well as Scotland. And your outlook as we head through into the weekend, well, some good news. Things are slowly warming up. We've lost the wind, we gained some sunshine. More rain across western Scotland, though, on Sunday. I'll see you later.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Dawn Neeson.
Touchdown in Belfast. Joe Biden has arrived in Northern Ireland as his spokesman is forced to deny claims the president hates the UK.
Well, he's not spending much time in the UK, is he? And Downing Street says, get back to work, doctors, because there'll be no pay talks until they withdraw that 35% pay demand. Difficult to have pay talks as the leader of the strike is on holiday in Greece.
Funny that, yeah.
Funny that.
The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is meeting world leaders in a bid to avoid a new global financial crisis. This all comes as the IMF predicts, carrying a lot of weight, that word, the UK will be the poorest performing big economy this year. What does that mean for the pound in your pocket, though? Stay with us to find out.
And is it going to be Coronation? Is it going to be Coronation chaos? The Daily Mirror is reporting it will be. A string of last-minute problems. We're a bit sceptical about that. But one of the problems is, of course, Harry and Meghan still haven't said whether they will or whether they won't. Attend, that is.
But let us know all your thoughts on our talking points today. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, here's your morning news with Bethany Elsey.
Thanks very much. Good morning. Here's your news at 11 o'clock. The US President will hold talks with the Prime Minister on the first full day of his visit to Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Joe Biden was greeted by Rishi Sunak as he landed in Belfast last night. He's also due to meet the main political leaders in Stormont ahead of his speech at Ulster University later. The four-day trip coincides with the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, but it also comes as devolved power sharing in the region remains collapsed over post-Brexit trade concerns. Biden said supporting the Windsor framework is one of his top priorities. His fifth cousin, Andrea McKivitt, told us she can't wait to meet him.
It's going to be like a big family reunion today when he gets back to Louth, I think, and there's a real sense of euphoria already and a great buzz about Carlingford and in Dundalk. You know, there's lots of different events planned, there's children drawing posters and, you know, people getting their faces painted, and I've got my badge here, my cousin Joe badge. Like, it's just, everyone's gone a bit crazy about the prospect of meeting the president.
Thousands of junior doctors are striking for a second day. Members of the British Medical Association are staging 4 days of industrial action this week, saying they have no other choice. But Health Secretary Steve Barclay is accusing the BMA of putting patients at greater risk after not agreeing any national exemptions for some services, such as cancer care. Downing Street is refusing to hold further talks with the union unless they abandon the 35% pay rise demand, which they say would cost the taxpayer £2 billion. Junior doctor Melissa Ryan told GB News the increase is needed to retain staff.
Every week, somebody from Canada or New Zealand or Australia sends me an offer and they say, look, we will pay you better, you'll have shorter working hours. And then when you've been here and you're working, sometimes my working week is 70 hours a week. And in conditions where I'm covering the job of 2 doctors, I can understand why people would make that choice. I would like to stay for the NHS. I hope that the doctors stay for the NHS, but I really do believe that we need our pay addressed.
The Labour is pledging to get our high streets thriving again by cutting business rates and energy bills. The Labour leader and Shadow Chancellor are in Great Yarmouth today to launch the new 5-point plan. It includes the introduction of vouchers for energy efficiency measures, such as double glazing, heat pumps and electric cars. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds says they'll also pay £13,000 for more neighbourhood police to crack down on antisocial behaviour.
Now, our plan is to centralise some of the procurement in police forces, use that saving to put over extra 10,000 more additional neighbourhood officers on the street. Crime and things takes time, but some of those changes to the tax system, to the incentives, they could be done by government very quickly if the political will was there to do that. And all it's about is making sure there's a more competitive environment, just tilting the balance a little bit in favour of the kind of people you're talking about, so we can have the kind of vibrant high streets, which I think everybody wants, but at the minute, it's fair to say we're not getting.
The Ministry of Defence says there is a serious level of inaccuracy in alleged leaked documents which claim UK Special Forces have operated in Ukraine. Reports suggest that as many as 50 personnel have been deployed alongside other Western forces, although the locations and missions have not been revealed. The classified US documents may have been released on the chat room of the social media platform Discord. The MOD is warning the leak has the potential to spread disinformation. The cost of childcare in the UK is forcing 1 in 4 parents to give up their job or drop out of education. A new study by the global children's charity Their World has found 74% of parents say they find it difficult to meet childcare costs. It's calling on governments to urgently prioritise spending on early years programmes. And in the US, 500 acres have been destroyed as a huge forest fire continues to spread across New Jersey. Aerial footage has captured the dramatic scenes in the east of the state. Authorities say only 10% of the blaze has been contained since yesterday evening, and nearby residents have been ordered to evacuate. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. And England's women's football team has ended their 30-game unbeaten run after losing 2-0 to Australia last night. The defeat was the first since Serena Wiegman took over. The Lionesses' boss says she hasn't been focused on the streak and that the team just wants to win every game. The squad will now start gearing towards the World Cup taking place in the summer. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Dawn and Andrew.
Well, we're expecting Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, to meet Joe Biden, the US President, in Belfast quite shortly. It's going to be a pretty fleeting meeting before he makes a speech and then disappears to the real part of the trip, to Southern Ireland to see his family.
Well, he's going to see his family. They're having a cup of coffee, I think.
They are.
But he will be happy because at least, you know, he did mention the Windsor Framework and the Northern Ireland peace thing in the same. So I think Rishi will be happy just to have a cup of coffee and know that, you know, he's even been noticed, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
The President was greeted last night on the steps of Air Force One by Rishi Sunak, who we hold bilateral talks with over that coffee in the next few minutes.
Then the President goes to Ulster University to deliver a short speech. Then he's off to the Republic of Ireland. Joining us now for more on this is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, it all seems a bit low-key and understated, considering this is the world's most powerful politician on British soil.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, crowds are starting, finally, somewhat belatedly, to gather here in Belfast, particularly around City Hall and the hotel Joe Biden's staying in this morning. But I'm outside Ulster University. He's due here in, less than 2 hours' time. And there are, frankly, you know, a couple of hundred people, rather than the tens of thousands one expect when a US president comes here. I think that's for two reasons. First of all, I think it's fair to say that Joe Biden, you know, he's not Bill Clinton, let's put it like that, in terms of his presence and his popularity here in Ireland. I think second of all, also he's just here for a short period of time. I mean, he's literally in Northern Ireland for about 17, 18 hours, of which half of the time he's spent in bed. So he's only making one public engagement. It's here at the University of Ulster, and I can tell you with the security operation, no one's going to get anywhere close to him. I mean, all the roads around this building are sealed off. Also, a little bit of a row this morning, guys, I should tell you about. Arlene Foster, of course, GB News presenter, former First Minister of Northern Ireland, was on GB News last night saying that she felt that Joe Biden was anti-UK. The White House responded, or well, I should say the National Security Council, essentially spokesperson for the administration, responded this morning saying that that is simply untrue, arguing that Joe Biden's track record shows he is not anti-British. The spokesperson went on to say that the president is very proud Irish American, very proud of those Irish roots, but is also a strong supporter of our bilateral partnership with the UK, not only bilateral but also with NATO, the G7 and the United Nations Security Council. As you have rightly pointed out, though, Joe Biden meeting with Rishi Sunak around now for a pretty short meeting, though it must be said this is the third time the two men have met as Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister in, the space of 6 months or so. And you're right, he'll be pretty pleased that Joe Biden has routinely, and I'm sure he will do in the speech later on today, mention the Windsor Framework. And I think there is a sense that these two men do get on personally, on a personal level, and that's quite important, but also a sense that the UK administration, Downing Street, are trying to mend relations with the White House, which haven't been, I would say, on the best of terms over the last decade or so.
Yeah, I was just saying, I don't think it's helping the fact that Joe Biden is spending such a short time in Northern Ireland before spending much longer in the Republic, and the fact that he's not coming to the UK for the coronation. I know it's not set in stone that they come here, but we haven't had one for 70 years, so you thought they might make the effort.
Darren, thanks for joining us. That's Darren McCaffrey, our political editor in Belfast, and he'll be there when the President arrives to make his very short speech at that university.
Meanwhile, elsewhere, Liz Truss is due to... A lot of people giving speeches.
Remember who? Who's she?
Shortest-serving Prime Minister, wasn't she? Give a speech advocating for a low-tax Britain. That's what got her into this mess, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to push against Chinese economic domination. The former Prime Minister is also expected to call for countries to abandon plans for minimum 15% corporation tax rate for multinationals. Joining us for more on this is the former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley.
Hi, Charlie.
Good morning, Charlie.
Can she still make waves, Charlie? Morning. Can she still make big waves over there in the United States, Liz Truss?
Well, I don't think she'll be making many more waves in the UK, so you've got to try somewhere, I suppose.
Oh,
below the belt.
And look, to be fair to Lizzie, she might have been the wrong character to in the UK. But the policies that she was advocating, particularly during the leadership election, of advocating for low taxes, greater growth in the country, that's what in the first instance, and that's what many people in this country agree with and want to see. So she might have been the wrong person for the job, but some of the policies are things that lots of Conservatives and lots of people across this country and across the world can advocate for. It's just all about timing and whether it's the right time to be slashing taxes and going for growth when the economy is so precious right around the world. We'll just have to wait and see.
She's just up the road in Washington, at the same time making her speech at the Heritage Foundation, Charlie, as Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, who she appointed, of course, is in the International Monetary Fund. And, of course, she's saying that we're being taxed too heavily by that very man she appointed, Jeremy Hunt.
Yes, and look, I think the IMF have come out with a couple of predictions now. The prediction that they came out with, I think it was yesterday, is a revision on their previous gloomy forecast. I'm not dismissing the IMF, but they do have a tendency to, as I say, recall their previous prediction, come out with something slightly better and slightly more optimistic. I think it's important to point out that when you hear statistics about the UK economy not growing as fast as other G7 countries, or if it seems a bit more doom and gloom, is because the UK economy has been functioning so well over previous years and been doing better than many G7 countries. So, of course, after COVID and after the tumultuous time that we had last year over the economy, whereas, as I say, if you go too far, too fast with economic policies, it can backfire. And that's why I think it's right for Jeremy Hunt to take a steady as she goes approach. And, of course, as we get through the other end, and when tax cuts can come in for hardworking people, then he will absolutely do that. But until then, I think we have to proceed with caution. Otherwise, we'll end up in a similar situation that we were last year.
Charlie, one final question for you, just briefly. Very interesting in her terminology that we are not match fit to take on China. What do you think of her use of that language in particular?
Well, I think it's certainly interesting. And look, China has always been a growing economy. It's always been competitive. It's been the second largest economy to the US for years. And I think we need to have an eye on China in many ways. I think some of the things that she's said in the past in terms of whether it's Chinese intelligence, whether it's about its economic approach, you do have to have a balance between working with China and trying to obviously grow the UK economy. But also you have to make sure that we as a nation, as a national economic powerhouse, that we can be on top of the Premier League in terms of economic standings as much as we can, and we can grow ourselves and we can do all that we can to make sure that we are as competitive as possible and can outdo China.
All right, that's Charlie Rowley. Thanks for joining us. Our Deputy Political Tom Harwood's with us in the studio. Tom, Liam Halligan made the point that the IMF, 25 of their last 28 predictions about the British economy were more negative than what actually happened.
That's certainly the case, and indeed since 2016 every single annual forecast that the IMF has made has been slightly below what the United Kingdom economy has actually achieved. However, it must be said that they haven't been that much out of bounds. Now, the OBR expects the United Kingdom economy to grow slightly this year. The IMF expects it to shrink by 0.3%. It's not the biggest difference. Ultimately, if we take an average view of this sort of forecasting, we can say the United Kingdom economy perhaps is flatlining. Yeah. Now, I think there are some very valid concerns of people who sort of look to the IMF and say, well, actually, there is some truth here. The United Kingdom is a very highly taxed, very highly regulated country, really and you can really see how this is holding back growth, particularly when we're looking at all sorts of elements of the economy, how hard it is to build things, how hard it is to get energy infrastructure, how expensive imported energy has become. One of the elements within the IMF report states that the United Kingdom is more reliant on imported energy than many other countries. France, for example, is not suffering as we are because they have a fleet of nuclear power stations. 70% of their electricity comes from their own nuclear power stations. We only have a handful. and we're actually decommissioning more than we're building. So I think there is actually a fair element of what the IMF is saying here. The United Kingdom does not have this gangbusters growth strategy. And perhaps Liz Truss really had a point back when she was Prime Minister for 49 days, that really there does need to be some sort of change of direction.
Yeah. It's interesting, the IMF themselves are saying it's a cost of living crisis, tightening financial conditions, obviously the pandemic, Russia's invasion, etc., etc. Meanwhile, everybody over here doing the country down are going, Brexit, Brexit, it's all Brexit's fault. But there is more to it than Brexit, because Germany are in a similar boat. We don't hear about
Germany is also expected to reduce their economic size this year. They've had a huge number of problems. But the United Kingdom, I think the biggest element the IMF has been talking about is our exposure to global energy markets. And that's an issue, that's a generational failure. The last time a nuclear power station was built in this country, it was approved by Margaret Thatcher. Amazing. It was constructed, the construction finished in the mid-1990s. Yeah. Not a single government of any party after that point has actually managed to get one of these things built. At the same time, you've got the SNP that has legislated to ban new nuclear power in Scotland. It also has a presumption against exploration in the North Sea for oil and gas. We've seen Parliament ban fracking in the United Kingdom, but also we've seen the Tory party ban onshore wind farms. Yeah. So it's not just the more traditional forms of energy, it's also some of the renewables in this country. The Green Party has been campaigning against solar farms, which seems like the most extraordinary thing. If you look across at all different forms of energy, every single party sort of finds a reason to say no. And that's left the United Kingdom massively exposed, far more exposed to international oil and gas prices than many other countries have been. I think that's probably the biggest driver of this. And ultimately, it requires some more imaginative thinking domestically. However, it is also true to say that the IMF doesn't always get these things right. It may well be the case that by the end of the year, the United Kingdom has actually managed to stave off recession as the OBR expects it to, but it won't be the biggest victory in the world. Growing by 0.1% isn't the most... Can we
ask you about another political problem in the Prime Minister's trade? It's that extraordinary story in the Daily Mail today about the cross-channel ferry and the French warship. We're giving France £480 million every 3 years to stop these illegal migrant crossing across the Channel, and we've got a French warship escorting the migrants across the Channel.
Yes, this really exposes the limits of the deals that have been reached with France, which really are land-based deals rather than water-based deals, if we want to put it in those crude terms. The number of patrols across beaches has massively increased. We now have joint patrols, part funded by France, part funded by the United Kingdom, a detention centre being constructed in France as well. However, as soon as any migrant gets into the water, suddenly the French put up their hands and say, not our issue. This is now the British issue.
They want rid of them.
They clearly don't want to be taking them back, and there is no returns agreement between the United Kingdom and France. It's something that might be worked on in a multilateral way in the coming years. That's something that Rishi Sunak has been trying to achieve, and the forum for achieving that might be something called the Calais Group, which is northern European countries that meet biannually. So we might well see more progress on that in coming months, but I don't think anyone is expecting anything anytime soon. As things stand, as soon as a migrant boat can get into the sea, even if it's only a couple of feet into the sea, even if it's only an inch into the sea, the French will not touch it.
It's astonishing. They miss all these boats. I mean, how many thousands come over here? And yet one British trawler in the wrong water, and that's it. We're in trouble. And because we have to move on, still to come, we'll be looking at the damage the rising cost of childcare is having on working families. You're watching To The Point on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns. all sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning and welcome back. Now, we are receiving the very first pictures of US President Joe Biden meeting Rishi Sunak and Northern Ireland leaders.
They're on their way.
They're on their way.
So he arrived at 10 o'clock last night on Air Force One. Obviously needed a good night's sleep. He's going to be speaking at a university in Ulster, but he's having... they won't call it a bilateral, having coffee, or is it a latte with the Prime Minister?
We're dressing this up, aren't we? Bilateral meeting with Rishi Sunak. They're having a coffee.
They are. But he's also meeting the 5 political leaders from the Northern Ireland parties.
Yes.
And, of course, the White House has had to deny the suggestion by Arlene Foster, our very own presenter,
Arlene Foster,
who said last night here on GB News that he doesn't like the UK.
And you know what? I think the only conclusion you can draw is that Arlene has a very good point, because spending such a short time in Northern Ireland, I know Stormont is
16 hours
16
and 2.5 days in Ireland.
Yeah, and a lot of that 16 hours he was asleep. He needs his nap time.
And we make the point that when he's not in bed asleep, he's asleep on the job, because, let's be honest, he is not doing great, which is why there's so few people turning out to see him. You remember, Dawn, when Clinton was in Britain, Northern Ireland, for signing the Northern Ireland, he was mobbed.
It was the rock star treatment. And, you know, we've been talking to our reporters in Northern Ireland, and people are just cycling past on bikes on the way into work, and it's like nothing's happening.
Yeah,
there's no flag waving. It's like...
So it's still an important occasion for the British Prime Minister to meet the President of the United States. It's his 3rd meeting with Biden in 6 months, which is pretty good going. But, of course, Biden isn't coming to the coronation. We shouldn't forget that.
I know, and everyone
the First Lady's going to be there.
Well, yeah. And everyone keeps going, oh, well, they don't normally come. In any case, we haven't had one for 70 years.
I know.
I mean, it's not like they're like buses. They happen all the time.
It is extraordinary. Anyway, it's going to be 2.5 days in Ireland. He's meeting his family, his 5th cousins, and he's going to go to his ancestral home. But we'll come back to that. But we're talking about the coronation, which he's not going to. The Daily Mirror on its front page today. Well, it says, coronation chaos fear, rehearsal overran, a row on the route, aides toiling round the clock to make it work, seating plan... Look, I did the Royal Beat for a long time. I was Royal Editor of the Daily Telegraph, and I did the Royal Beat on the Times for a long time. The one thing we do well is pomp and pageantry. There will not be a problem. But what we do know is that problem with the seating plan is Harry and Meghan.
Well, and Andy as well.
And
I
Prince
have to
Andrew.
mention Andrew as well.
Where are they going to put them? And, of course, we still don't know if Harry and Meghan are going to turn up. I'd have thought with that sort of education, Eton, and being brought up in the royal family, he'd have learnt about manners.
Well, I mean, it's just... You know, can you imagine, right, OK, at home, if this was a family wedding and you'd invited sort of a very close family relative, and it's like, they just don't let you know.
I know.
I mean, bringing it down to a normal level, you'd be really, really angry.
3 weeks to go.
It is very rude.
Joining us now to talk about this is Richard Fitzwilliam, the royal commentator. Richard, you and I have seen these sort of stories before. It will all be all right on the day of the coronation. Of course it will, because they do it so well. But there is no doubt that Harry and Meghan are causing an issue over the seating arrangements, because they're not working royals. Where are they going to be put if they turn up?
There's no question that Harry and Meghan are playing a game on this, because of course they know whether or not they'll be coming. Indeed, in my opinion, they couldn't possibly not come, because all their contracts are because they're members of the royal family, and of course they make their money through attacking the royal family. As we've seen, we know there's a very big rift. Of course, that causes problems when it comes to planning. Yes, I agree, the Daily Mirror has in fact simply elaborated, you know, you have absolute chaos here. The route, there are problems with that, and rehearsal, problems with that, and they don't know what they're going to wear, and so forth. In fact, as you correctly say, it's going to be absolutely brilliant. The procession's going to be marvellous. Let's just hope for the weather. But so far as Harry and Meghan's concerned, there's absolutely no excuse for all this grandstanding. I mean, it is quite literally childish.
We're only, 3 weeks away now, Richard? I mean... So it's his, like, we're all getting excited for it. And you think what the royal family have been through recently? I mean, at the end of the day, there was family at the heart of this, right? OK. And Charles is a dad and a grandfather. So taking away the royal thing. So to have your own son being so rude and disrespectful to you on the eve of the most important day of your life, he must be hurting him on a personal level as well, surely.
Well, undoubtedly, but unfortunately, I don't think that the Sussexes greatly care about that. I mean, one has to bear in mind, although when they set up their interview with Oprah, they didn't know the Duke of Edinburgh was going to be in hospital, went ahead, and they were as hurtful as they were, knowing that he was. And I think that, you know, in the last period of the Queen's life, their behaviour must have undoubtedly caused a great many problems for her. And I think this is a continuation of the fact that they like springing surprises, they like doing the unexpected, and so far as this is concerned, well, I don't think they've any choice but to come. Of course, you don't absolutely certainly know, so they're enjoying the fact that there's so much speculation. But as you say, what about manners?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you'd have thought, as I say, Richard, he was particularly well brought up. We know where he went to school, and the Queen was a stickler for tradition. And it comes down to plain ill manners, doesn't it?
Well, it comes down to not only ill manners, but of course the desire to get more and more publicity. I mean, Meghan, for example, is being apparently shortly be a woman of vision. This was via Gloria Steinem, the noted feminist. But surely it would be much more beneficial for them, because they're going to have to do this anyway. Their ratings reportedly, according to Newsweek polls, have plummeted in America. They'll have to decide what seriously they want to do when they've managed to get through this phase. It may take many more months or years of actually attacking the institution of monarchy or attacking the royal family in one way or another every single time that they appear, because that's, of course, what a lot of people tune in for if it's an interview. And, of course, there may well be 3 more books, apparently.
Make a quick prediction, Richard. Will they be there or not?
They've got to be there, because they will be an irrelevance and be isolated if they aren't.
Exactly what I think.
Exactly. Or will they stay in America and take millions more to commentate for
Netflix? Richard Fitzwilliam, royal commentator, thanks for joining us. Always good to talk to you.
Absolutely. Fascinating stuff. I can't wait, to be honest with you. Right, OK, still to come, we'll have the latest from Joe Biden's trip to Belfast. We've actually got the footage coming up now, I think.
We are.
Excellent.
Looking forward to it.
That's after your morning news with Bethany Elsey.
Good morning, it's 11:30. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom. The US President Joe Biden is currently holding talks with the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in Belfast. These pictures coming to us just a few moments ago. Joe Biden's 4-day trip to Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic coincides with the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. But it also comes as devolved power sharing in the region remains collapsed over post-Brexit trade concerns. Well, overnight, President Joe Biden said supporting the Windsor framework, which was agreed between Rishi Sunak and the EU to ease trading roadblocks in Northern Ireland, is one of his top priorities. He's also due to meet the main political leaders in Stormont ahead of his speech at Ulster University later. Thousands of junior doctors are striking for a second day today. Members of the British Medical Association are staging 4 days of industrial action this week, saying they have no other choice. But Health Secretary Steve Barclay is accusing the BMA of putting patients at greater risk after not agreeing any national exemptions for some services, such as cancer care. Downing Street is refusing to hold further talks with the union unless they abandon the 35% pay rise demand. Conciliation Service ACAS says it's ready to help end the dispute, and junior doctor Melissa Ryan told GB News the increase is needed to retain staff.
Every week, somebody from Canada or New Zealand or Australia sends me an offer and they say, look, we will pay you better, you'll have shorter working hours. And then when you've been here and you're working, sometimes my working week is 70 hours a week. And in conditions where I'm covering the job of 2 doctors, I can understand why people would make that choice. I would like to stay for the NHS. I hope that the doctors stay for the NHS, but I really do believe that we need our pay addressed.
Labour is pledging to get our high streets thriving again by cutting business rates and energy bills. The Labour leader and Shadow Chancellor are in Great Yarmouth today to launch the new 5-point plan. It includes the introduction of vouchers for energy efficiency measures, such as double glazing, heat pumps and electric cars. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2419 and 1.1363 euros. The price of gold is £1,619.06 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is currently at 7,843 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:38. You're with To The Point on GB News.
And in the last half hour, we've finally seen him. He's finally got out of bed, the President of the United States. We've seen him having coffee, or is it latte? We're not quite sure, with Rishi Sunak. They're finally talking. It's not going to be a long conversation because he's then off to make a speech at the university and then he's off to Ireland. But he's smiling, and that's good. And Rishi Sunak's smiling, and it's good PR for the Prime Minister.
Two grown men managed to smile.
Yeah, exactly. And they finally got into... Do you think Joe Biden knows if he's in Northern Ireland or Southern Ireland?
You know what? While I completely understand why people constantly say this about Joe Biden, I always feel very sorry for him because he's clearly suffering some health issues there.
He's the President of the United States. I feel sorry for the... I feel sorry for the free world that he's in charge of it.
Well, I know, but I mean, it's like, he doesn't actually look like he knows where he is. Meanwhile, Rishi, to be fair, is bouncing up and down like an overexcited schoolboy.
He is. Well, well, I think those shots are going to get more coverage than the Labour leader in Great Yarmouth, frankly, talking again about what he's doing for the High Street.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, High Street's important, Great Yarmouth's important, and Keir Starmer is important.
So...
Anyway, right, OK, we're moving on. A new study has revealed that the increasing costs of childcare have ultimately resulted in one in four British parents having to give up their job, cynical here, in having to give up their job in order to look after their children.
Well, let's speak to the founder of the motherhood charity with a rather catchy title, Pregnant Then Screwed, Jolie Brearley, with her thoughts. Jolie, really? 1 in 4 parents are giving up their jobs because they can't afford childcare? Where do you get those figures from?
They're not my figures,
right?
But this is an international study comparing the UK to other countries, and we know that we have either the most expensive childcare system in the world or the third most expensive childcare system in the world, depending on how you cut the data. It costs on average £15,000 a year now for a childcare place, £19,000 a year in London. So you can see how that, for many families, just doesn't add up and means they have to leave their job.
What do you want to happen? You want the government to provide more money? Is that your point, Jolie?
Well, we know in the spring statement, of course, that Jeremy Hunt did pledge an extra £4 billion to childcare, but those new funded hours won't come in for at least another year. The whole scheme won't be in place until 2 years' time. And in the meantime, costs are continuing to rise for parents. So we've just seen another increase in childcare costs as of the 1st of April. And so inevitably, before any of those new funded hours come in, we're going to see more and more parents leave the labour market as a result. And that's, of course, bad for the economy. It's bad for children. And it's really bad for families because this entrenches poverty. If you cannot afford to work, then inevitably you're going to be claiming benefits and you're going to be living in poverty. And that's just bad for all of us.
And it is, of course, it's normally the women that suffer more in this. And, you know, both parties are on a drive to get more women, and certainly older women, back into the market force as well.
Yeah, we know there are about 1 million women who do not work because of caring responsibilities. And so, it makes sense that we have the systems and the infrastructure needed to enable these women to go to work, because, that has a benefit on our economy, as Jeremy Hunt keeps stipulating. And, compared to other countries, we are way behind them in terms of recognising childcare as economic infrastructure. And so, we really need to be doing a lot more within the next year to prevent more parents falling out of the labour market, because as the Chancellor keeps saying, what we want to be doing right now is enabling those people who are classed as economically inactive to be able to go into the workplace so that they can financially contribute to their families and they can financially contribute to our economy.
Jolie, just one very quick question. I am playing devil's advocate here. I mean, I do understand, certainly from a woman's perspective, this issue. But I was listening to an interview this morning with a junior doctor who was saying her and her husband, both junior doctors, they couldn't afford childcare, but they knew they were going to be junior doctors and they had that child, and now they're expecting other taxpayers to pay for it, but they knew they were in the financial situation they're in. So what would you say to people who say parents actually need to take responsibility for planning their family more thoughtfully rather than just relying on the government?
I would say that why on earth are we in that situation where junior doctors cannot afford to go to work? Surely all of us want junior doctors to be able to go to work. Surely all of us want nurses to be able to go to work. We know that we have a shortage of staff within our healthcare sector and within other sectors. It makes absolute sense that we give them the mechanisms that they need to be able to go to work. And we know from other countries that this has a benefit on the economy. If you look at Canada, they recently invested $30 billion in their childcare sector to create a system that costs no more than $10 a day. And they did it because for every dollar they invested, they got between $1.50 and $2.80 back into the wider economy. So yes, of course, people can say this is your choice. You decided to have children, you should be planning better. But actually, this benefits all of us if we get it right. So let's just get it right. Let's fix the problem and let's all as a result.
OK. Thanks for joining us. That's Jolie Brearley from the wonderful sounding organisation Pregnant Then Screwed.
I deliberately gave you that bit. So
I wanted to read that.
Thank you very much for all this.
The guys are back. Patrick O'Flynn, columnist and political commentator, and Kevin Schofield, political editor with HuffPost UK. You've got a fabulous story in the Times, Kevin. I'm intrigued by this.
Yeah, as it says in the intro, where there's muck, there's brass.
Yes.
Now, there's a trend now, apparently, for upmarket manure.
Right.
Believe it or not. Now, they're saying it's because of lockdown, the trend for DIY gardening.
Yeah.
And a trend towards being kinder to the environment. Now, people are paying, apparently, £20 for a 1.5 kilogram bag, which isn't terribly big, for so-called climate compost, which is comes from cows and sheep which are fed on a nutritious, your head in your hands here, Don, environmentally friendly diet.
What are these people thinking
which
of?
Apparently is better for the environment, but also better for your plants.
Right.
It says it's abundant in naturally occurring soil microbes, which increases the nutrient density of the produce we grow.
Right. So does this...
So how much again? How much?
20 quid.
20 quid for posh poo.
So does this mean you're going to get nicer tomatoes and nicer vegetables as well?
I think that's what they want you to believe.
Right.
That's what try to get you to part with your 20 pounds.
Yeah, well, they could see you coming a mile off.
Are you a gardener, Kevin?
I'm not personally, no.
Right.
No.
Are you a
We
gardener,
do have a
Patrick?
garden, but...
I am a little bit of a gardener these
days. And would you pay £20 for a bag of posh poo?
20 quid for posh poo, come on.
For 1.5 kilograms, when you can get a 10 kilogram bag of perfectly good compost for a fraction of that price. No, I'm not buying.
You're not sold on this, Patrick?
No.
I didn't think so. What do you grow in your garden?
We grow fuchsias, lilies, a couple of plants beginning with A that have gone out of my mind now, so you can tell I'm no Alan Titchmarsh here.
I spotted that one.
Yeah.
Come on, you're asking all the questions then, Andrew. What have you got in your garden?
It's a very nice garden, but I share it with the people in the flat downstairs, and it's lots of bushes and flowers, but no vegetables. I don't do the garden.
Alliums.
Alliums. We know them well.
Allium, yes.
Yeah, I've never heard of them.
No, me neither, but it begins with A, so you were close.
Now, what's happening? The CBI, and come on, Pat, there's been an extraordinary upheaval there.
Yes, the organisation, the CBI, which I have to say I regard as one of the more pompous, or campaigning organisations in public life. They always seem to have the ear of every high up, and they were obviously very anti-Brexit. They tend to be on the side of big business rather than the entrepreneurial spirit. But they've really come a cropper with having to get rid of Tony Danker, their Director General. Sacked unceremoniously. Over various allegations of of a sex pest nature.
20 separate women have complained.
Which is astonishing, and he admits that he inadvertently clearly made some people feel uncomfortable.
It's funny how they do it inadvertently with 20 different women, isn't it?
Well, exactly.
Inadvertent 20 times.
But the interesting thing is then, so we have, it's a big position in public life. The Director General of CBI, and we have a woman appointed, Rain Newton-Smith, who was the chief economist, married mother of 4 from Oxfordshire. I think if you're the CBI and you've got scandal, maybe the case for having a capable and experienced woman in charge, rather than a guy who kind of thinks he's some kind of Lothario or ultra alpha male. You can see why they thought this will calm things down. But I just think it shows the glass ceiling is gone, because coincidentally, our first ever head of GCHQ was appointed, who was a woman head yesterday as well, Anne Keast Butler. So I think this is generally good news. And in both cases, no one is saying that they aren't there on their merits. But one thing I notice is that in both cases, you have these two very capable but double-barrelled surname people. So we've certainly got rid of the sexist glass ceiling, but have we? Is it still important to be a posh person?
We still have the class ceiling. Try saying that as well.
Fascinating, because GCHQ is our great listening centre. It's hugely strategically important. And I wonder if she was a spy.
I think she's worked for GCHQ before and then switched on to a senior position in MI5. So
she was a spy.
Yeah, she's not going to tell you.
She was a spy. Do you think she was a spy, Kevin?
I think if you put 2 and 2 together, before there, I think it is. I think it's a safe assumption.
But we make better spies, evidently.
Women, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Mata Hari was the most famous.
Some of us are better than
Mata Hari was the most famous.
Absolutely. We're actually moving on to another special forces story, this one. Now, this story is actually causing a lot of controversy, Kevin, because our GCHQ are saying, well, be careful that, how you report this story. So this is the Daily Telegraph, and they're saying Britain's elite special forces and dozens more Western military personnel are on the ground in Ukraine. Now, it has caused controversy this morning, so what's the problem with this story?
Well, so this is based on a leak which emerged in a chat room on social media, the chat room app Discord, which claims that... what's interesting here, I think, is that the UK has got quite a large involvement on the ground in Ukraine in comparison to other similar nations. So according to this, these documents, 50 special forces, that's SAS effectively, are on the ground in Ukraine. Now, you compare that to France, 15, the US, only 14. There's one Dutch member of their special forces there. This is according to these documents. And I think it just shows actually how deeply involved in Ukraine we actually are. Now, you're never going to get the government to confirm it for obvious reasons.
What are they supposedly doing now? Are they training or are they actually involved in fighting?
Well, more likely training, I would imagine. It doesn't go into the details of exactly what they're doing in there, and I guess we'll have to wait for the next cache of secret documents to be revealed. But it's safe to say that they're up to very important work to try and defeat Russia on the ground in Ukraine. And as I say, it's just really interesting to me anyway that we've got several dozen there in comparison to France and the US,
UK and France
don't have as many.
Yeah, the UK and France have cast doubt on the information and say...
Well, they would, wouldn't they?
They would say that, wouldn't they? There are training things going on.
Do you think this is down to Boris's arming Ukraine a year before the invasion?
I think it's almost certainly the fact that Boris Johnson, for all his faults, was the first person in terms of European leadership to see this issue very clearly, to anticipate what was going to happen, and to take, those big decisions. He tells us that he got right. He took this big decision to really go all in with Ukraine before the invasion, and I'm pretty sure that would explain why we have more special forces on the ground than any other country. And I think personally that's a good thing. And that when you read of a strategic bridge to Crimea having been blown up and things like this, you wonder maybe our guys have helped that along.
Do you think, is it the SAS?
Well, that's used for
that's the influence, isn't it?
Special
but that's why we'll never be told.
St. Patrick earlier, the famous headlines from the old days was "Our boys go in." It's great. These stories are great because they can never be completely denied.
Exactly.
You can write it.
Take it with a pinch of salt, but it's probably true. OK, so Kevin, we're staying with you. This is another story from Daily Telegraph. We just discussed this earlier, didn't we? You love this story. The leader of the Junior Doctors' Union has gone on holiday for a week in the face of urgent attempts on the Minister to bring striking medics to the negotiating table. Well, he's on holiday at a mate's wedding in Greece.
Yeah, Dr. Rob Lawrenson. Yeah, quite unfortunate timing.
Terrible timing.
For him, and I'm sure he understands that fully. What I think is interesting about this is that this is obviously a story which has been briefed from
it's on the front
government
page of the Mail as well.
side. It's in front of the Mail and the Telegraph, obviously friendly papers as far as the government is concerned. And I think it demonstrates that we're still quite some way away from a resolution to this. If we're at a stage where, rather than getting around the table and actually having discussions and trying to thrash out a deal, we've got black ops effectively briefing against the heads of the unions, it doesn't really create an atmosphere where they're likely to sit down again.
But it's a gift, isn't it, away for the Tories, Kevin, Patrick, because they're attacking Steve Bartley, the Health Secretary, for not negotiating. Where is he? Well, where's the leader of the junior doctors to do negotiating? He's on holiday in Greece for a whole week.
Yes, and I think that it'll help the government a little bit, but I think they will struggle to create an Arthur Scargill demon union leader. I think those days are somewhat past. But it all feeds back to the idea that the BMA and the junior doctors, this idea of 35% as their entry point for talks. I can understand why ministers think, well, there's no point really going in. I mean, we've settled other disputes at much lower figures. So, if we're talking about anything over 10%, the risk would be that would trigger new disputes in other parts of the health service. And
do you think it's a strategic error going in at 35%, Kevin?
I mean, 35% is incredibly high. There's just no way. No government, it's not a Conservative, no Labour government would agree to anything like that. And you're right. The figure that's been put on it, they're saying, that's £1 billion would settle it. Fair enough, but as Patrick says, it wouldn't just be this. Then other unions would quite rightly turn around, because they're still in dispute, obviously, remember, with the
teachers. The teachers are going on 2-day strikes in April and May.
But the BMA are saying, in their defence, the BMA are saying this isn't a pay rise, this is what we have lost.
The restoration, they call it.
Restoration, exactly. So, but it would be handy if they were at least talking to each other.
But they've got to come down. They've got to come down below 20% at the very least, you would say, before the government are going to talk to them.
I would think so, yeah. And especially, there is a lot of public sympathy for doctors and NHS, clearly.
Of course.
But private sector workers aren't looking at anything like... They're not looking at anything... 5% would be a great deal right now in the private sector, so I think they've got to be very careful.
And I think they're going to settle with the nurses at around 5%, aren't they, with a one-off cash payment of about £1,600.
I think most people see as reasonable and fair. Because 35% is at the upper end of expectations, you might say.
Can I just move on to one final story, because I love this story, being surrounded by men this morning.
It's great being surrounded by men.
Well, I'll just read it out very quickly. Elderly men who lose more than 10% of body weight are almost 3 times more likely to die in the next few years than those who don't. We're out of time, so we can't discuss that story, though, boys, which is so annoying.
Why was Dawn looking at me when she talked about elderly men?
My advice is drink beer, and then you won't get that sudden weight loss.
Very good point. Or gin and tonic, or vodka and tonic. Don't mind, really.
On that note, we've come to the end of our show. It's flown by again. Thank you so much. It's been huge fun. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. This is To The Point with him, Andrew, and me, Dawn, and we're back at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
See you then.
Weather.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir with your weather update this Wednesday. Wind warnings remain in force across the south as well as the west, with some heavy rain around and also some blustery showers. Let's pick up on those warning zones through today. Low pressure firmly in charge. We'll see gales, perhaps even severe gales for a time across more southern and western parts of England and Wales, particularly along the coast, and the wind warning from 11 o'clock across Belfast and much of Northern Ireland. Again, some strong gusty winds. A swirl of cloud and rain. That rain turns heavy, extending across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the Isle of Man, and this batch here extends from Wales and the West Country up towards much of England and Wales. Sunshine and showers towards the northeast and the eastern side of the country. They could be heavy, and a keen breeze for Shetland. Temperatures will struggle as we head into the latter part of the day. Now, low pressure remains firmly dominant through Wednesday night and into Thursday. However, we lose a lot of the rain anywhere from Wales down towards the Midlands, the southeast, showers for the southwest of England, and some heavy bursts likely across Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Wind still will be a feature of the weather across the southwest of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, through Thursday, the morning will be wet across the northern half of the UK and further showers across the far southwest, in between some sunshine. But as the sun gets to work, we will see some scattered showers through the day, and they could turn out to be heavy. So it's sunshine and showers on Thursday, winds not as strong, and temperatures a couple of degrees higher, making it feel a little bit warmer. Here's a snapshot of Friday. More rain across more southern areas on Friday. A quieter day all round, anywhere from northern England, eastern England, Northern Ireland, as well as Scotland. And your outlook as we head through into the weekend, well, some good news. Things are slowly warming up. We've lost the wind, we gained some sunshine. More rain across western Scotland, though, on Sunday. I'll see you later.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are. When I